Well, hey, welcome all you wiretappers out there. Good to be back here in the studio of Gangland Wire. I have a show today with a officer from the New York Police Department. We're going to tell some New York Police Department stories. You guys know that I spent 25 years on the Kansas City Police Department. Well, Marique Baroldus spent 20 years on the New York City Police Department. She's got some great stories. So welcome, Marique.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks so much for having me.
Great. I'm really glad to have you on. I think I'm looking forward to our mutual friend, Vic Ferrari, says that you have some good stories. And so we're going to hear some good stories today. I'm sure of that. Now,
Yeah.
the book, guys, is 20 and Out. It's a compilation of chaos experience while serving 20 years in the New York City Police Department. Here's a review. I must say that the author was descriptive enough to set the scene of each story. I love that she explained everything, which made you feel like you were right there with her. I couldn't put it down and love that each chapter was a job she went to or encountered. Great job, Marie. So that's, a great review. And you got like all 5-star reviews, I believe. And so, guys, you can get that on Amazon. I'll have a link to it in my show notes. So, Marie, tell us a little bit about yourself, your education and where did you work with the PD before we get into some stories?
So I grew up on Long Island in Malvern, which is right on the border of Queens and Nassau County. I went to New Paltz College, and while I was up there, I realized that I wanted to be a cop in New York City. So I left New Paltz, which is in upstate New York. I came back home and I went to school at John Jay College in Manhattan for criminal justice. I took a lot of law classes, and I started going on the law track. I was really thinking maybe I wanted to be a lawyer. And I had taken the test for the New York City Police Department, and they called me. And I said, you know what? I don't know about case law. Reading it is fun to, get an A in class or, whatever. But to do this like as a chore for the next 30 years might get a little boring. So I said, you know what? I'm kind of an adrenaline junkie. And I might as well just go work in the police department where I can be outside and not stuck in a room with four walls for the rest of my life. So I went into the academy July 1st of 2002. I graduated, I think January 1st of 2003 or 2nd, somewhere around there. And then when I graduated the academy, I went into transit in the subways in District 20, which is like Queens North and somewhat into Queens South, a little bit of Brooklyn. And it wasn't my cup of tea. I had a lot of fun down there, a lot of good guys. Was in the blackout of I think it was 2003 blackout where like the whole Northeast lost power and we had to go into the subways and rescue people off of the trains and stuff. And there was some fun times down there, but it wasn't the type of police work that I was like really interested in. I was watching the RMPs, the police cars going flying by with lights and sirens and stuff, and I'm just sitting there watching turnstiles, and I'm like, that's the kind of stuff I want to be involved in. So I put in transfer requests and ended up going to the 105th precinct, which is in Queens, right on the border of Queens and Nassau. Really big precinct, runs from like the Grand Central Parkway down to JFK Airport. And I went there. I went on patrol, which is the lowest part of the bar. I did 4 to 12, which was 3 in the afternoon to 11:30 at night, which was my favorite tour to work. So worked with a lot of fun guys on that tour. Busted chops, got my chops busted, and then I went to I did a response order for a little while where you basically only responded to in progress jobs that kind of cover the gap in between tour changes. Then I went into a conditions unit, which addresses quality of life issues like, the guys who pee and the guys who drink with an open container, because that was illegal at the time. And then from there, I went to SNU, which is street narcotics enforcement, which is like dealing with street level drug rings. Then I went into anti-crime. And then I did field intelligence at the precinct level for a few years. And then the NYPD started a new unit for animal cruelty to investigate animal cruelty. So I went there, which was a brand new unit, got that started, did the training for it for, the cops in the police department, did a couple investigations. And then I realized that wasn't for me. So I requested to go back. So I went back to the 105th precinct and I ended up going right back into the FIO spot, which was great because it was like my favorite spot. And the girl that had replaced me was getting promoted. So it worked out. And I stayed there for the rest of my career. And all in all, it was a blast. It was a blast. Had a really good time.
So you're using some terminology some of these guys might not know. RMP is Radio
Oh,
Motor Patrol. That's a police car with a radio in it, right?
that's a marked police car. Yeah, sorry. Sorry. Yeah. Talking to a fellow cop, I forgot. Yeah, sorry about
Right.
that. Yeah.
And
Yeah, to the
so,
translation.
and the next one was you just said it. It was RIO or something IO. What was that?
FIO,
FI.
FIO's Field Intelligence Officer.
Oh, okay, a field intelligence officer. So you know, I looked at some of your stories, and I tell you what, especially dealing with emotionally disturbed people is one of the more difficult things that any cop's asked to do. I've got my own stories. I mean, there's nothing like having to wrestle a naked man in the middle of the night in the middle of an intersection, and it's hotter than hell. There's nothing
They're
like
super
quite like
slippery.
that.
Yeah.
They're slippery as hell. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I know you got some stories, and especially many times they'll have a knife. I remember looking in a window, and there's this crazed woman with a big butcher knife just raised up, looking out at me. It's like, oh man, and we just walked away because we didn't have really. She wouldn't answer the door, and we just had a call that there was some problem inside. We just walked away from that one. So I know you got some stories about that.
Yeah, the knives are always a lot of fun. They make this
Yeah.
situation very interesting when you get involved with somebody who's emotionally disturbed. We had a lot of that. It's actually, I think, a bigger problem than most people realize. I think the interesting part of the EDP, or emotionally disturbed person, is that you never really know when the switch is going to happen, and they're going to go from being completely compliant to like completely nuts and violent. So, what you refer to with the knife, one of the stories that's in my book. When I was on patrol, we had a call for a neighbor had called about her neighbor who was an EDP and had pulled a knife on her. So, my partner and I get there, and whenever you're dealing with an emotionally disturbed person, you always have backup coming. There's always another car coming. And in the NYPD, we never worked alone. We always had a partner with us in the car. So I knew there were at least two other cops coming. So we get there, and the woman's like, this guy pulled a knife on me. He's a little crazy. He went running back inside the house. He's in there somewhere with the knife. So, okay, all right, whatever. So I'm walking up the driveway, and I'm looking into the windows to see if I can see him as I'm walking up. And glued or taped to every single window pane were cloves of garlic. So I'm like, okay, so either, this guy is a legit Italian and he just likes hanging garlic from all of his windows, or, he's got some kind of Dracula complex and, he's got to protect himself from the outside world. So I said, okay, here we go. So the back door was open where he had run into. So, you go to the door and you kind of stick your head in, you're looking around, and I don't see anything. I don't hear anything. So I yell out police, NYPD, and my partner and I walk in there, and it leads to like a little kitchen area. So I look around, he's not in a kitchen. So I was relieved about that, because you never really want to deal with anybody in the kitchen, because, the implements of destruction that are in
Yes.
that room are numerous. And, I don't want to deal with a knife, and, I got a gun, but I don't really want to have to use it if I don't really need to. So I was very happy to see that he wasn't in the kitchen. So I moved through the living room, and, it is eerily quiet in this house. I don't hear TV. There's no radio. There's no sound. I'm yelling NYPD, police, but I don't really want to give away my position too much. So I get to the bottom of the stairs and I look up, and at the top of the stairs, you can see like the hallway, which was very narrow with the railing. And I mean, the stairway was very narrow as it was. And I'm like, well, he's got to be up there. So I got to go carefully. So I take a couple of steps up, and I'm looking, waiting. And, I have my hand on my gun just in case, because I don't know where this knife is. And I'm yelling NYPD, and I hear nothing. So I keep going up a couple more steps. And all of a sudden, he just pops out. And there he is at the top of the stairs with the knife in his hand. So, obviously I draw down on him. And I'm like, all right, put the knife down. Put it down. Calm down. I'm not here to hurt you. Let's just put the knife down. Let's talk. Just doing the verbal judo of working on compliance instead of force. So out of the corner of my eye, I can see the other sector had arrived, my backup, and then my partner was there. So I had like three other cops, and they're all big dudes, So I'm not really too worried about it, but I'm just looking at this guy and I'm like, he's got the high ground. He's got a knife. This guy's just going to take a flying leap and stab me in my skull. And that's going to be like lights out for me. Like this is not going to end well for me. I am at a tactical disadvantage. How am I going to handle this? So I'm just like, I'm drawing down on him and I'm just, put the knife down. Don't do it. Just put the knife down. I don't want to hurt you. And he's just not doing it, and he's looking at me, and you can see in his eyes he is a little off. He's not all there. You can see he's calculating in his head, and I'm like, well, I'm not backing down, but going up is going to be a tricky move. So we're kind of frozen in place for, it was probably a minute, but it felt like 10 or 11 years, because it just, everything kind of slows down when you're in those situations. It feels like forever. So all of a sudden he goes running down the hall. So I take off up the stairs after him, and I go running down the hallway, and I see he doesn't have the knife in his hand. So, as I'm running down the hallway, I put my gun back away. I can hear the three guys that are my backup up the stairs. I can hear them stomping up the steps right behind me. So I go to grab him in the room, and I go to put his arm behind his back in what an arm bar position. And I go to take him out. So I did this like leg sweep practice thing. I'm like, I got this leg sweep thing, like my new karate moves. So I go to do the leg sweep, and I hit the side of his ankle, and he just stands there. Doesn't move, doesn't go down, like total failure of my maneuver. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And I was so mad. So meanwhile, my partners, I guess they didn't know that the knife wasn't in that hand. I don't think they could have seen, because my body kind of took up the whole hallway. So they see me try and like kick him down to the ground, and I'm unsuccessful in my endeavors. So one of the guys, just his inertia, just grabs the guy and just pummels him, and they both go flying into the wall. And I'm just like sitting there like, man, I was so excited to use my move, and it should have worked, and it just fell flat. And that was it. So we ended up, the knife was in the room. He had dropped it right next to him. So I didn't notice it when I was running into the room. But so we got him cuffed up, and he apologized for pulling the knife on me or whatever, and in a moment of clarity that he had for about 2 seconds. So I call an ambulance for an EDP or whatever, and I have to escort him to the hospital because he was violent. So I get into the ambulance with him, and he's he's giving the ambulance guy his information, like name and date of birth and all that stuff. And he's like, yeah, so I'm the sun god Ra. And I'm like, really? Okay, tell me about that. What does being the sun god Ra entail? So, he's like talking about all this stuff or whatever. And I'm like, what's up with the garlic? Like, I don't understand that. And I kind of like interrupted him at one point in his story, and he did not appreciate the interruption. So I'm like, okay, you just keep on rattling away. You're handcuffed on the bed. You're nice and safe. So, I just sat back and kind of just listened to him for the ride. But at least in that scenario, for an emotionally disturbed person, you kind of knew what you were getting yourself into, because you knew he was already violent and he knew it was going to be a problem. There was another time where my partner and I were completely fooled by this one chick. We had been called there by her family, and they're like, she's crazy, she's nuts, she needs to go to the hospital. And they're showing me this key. Ask her what the key is for. So I'm talking to this girl, and she's like you and I. She's just normal every day, knows what year it is, knows the president, talking about normal stuff. She's on her phone. She's like, they're just crazy. They don't like me, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, she's not exhibiting any signs of mental disturbance or, something's wrong with her. And I'm not really in the habit of like violating people's Fourth Amendment rights and just, putting them in a 72-hour mandatory lockup, because the family isn't for it. Like, I can't, I don't know what the situation here. I don't know what the problem is. She has an apartment. There's a nice couch. It's clean. There's a coffee table, a TV. It looks relatively normal. I don't see anything wrong with anything she's saying. We can't do anything. So the family was pissed at us, but what are you going to do? So we left. So a few hours later, we get a call for the same location for like loud music. The neighbors complaining that the apartment's playing really loud music. So I'm like, I tell Central, the radio dispatcher, I'm like, okay, show me going back over there. We had an EDP at that location earlier, because our Centrals change every half hour or so. So it wasn't the same Central as it had been earlier that evening. So I go back over there, and the door's like ajar. So I walk in, and there she is sitting on the couch, and the music is just blaring, and she lowers the music, and my partner starts talking to her. And I'm thinking like maybe somebody's in here and she's kind of like hesitant to talk to us. And is she being held against her will, or somebody's here that she doesn't want or something? So I'm like, let me go look in the rest of the apartment, just make sure nobody's like, hiding around a corner. So I go into the kitchen, no tables, no toaster on the counter. It's nothing. I go into the next room, which I think would have been a dining room, and there's nothing there. There's no dining room table. There's no rug. It looks like somebody had moved out and took all the furniture. And then I look at the window, and where the window clasp is to lock the window, there was tinfoil on all of the windows. And I'm like, okay, here we go. So, I look around the next corner into the bedroom, no furniture. The only room that was furnished was the living room that we had happened to be in earlier in the day. So I said, okay, tinfoil is a good sign of somebody who's like a paranoid schizophrenic, that they think people are listening, and the tinfoil kind of blocks the signal from permeating their home. So I go into the room, and I my partner doesn't know this, right? Because she's been talking to her the whole time. So to alert my partner without saying it outright, I said, I'll say, I think in the book I used the name Jane. I don't remember what her real name was, and I wouldn't say it anyway. But I said, Jane, what's up with the tinfoil on your windows, dude? What's going on with that? And she's like, so now my partner knows like something's up. So she goes, well, there's a mailman that sits in the back parking lot, and he tries to listen to my conversation. So I put the tinfoil on the windows to block him from listening. I said, okay, here we go. We got a little problem here. So I'm like, your mom was talking to me earlier about a key or something. I'm like, what's that key for? And she's like, oh, it's for the White House. She's like, George Bush gave it to me. It's for the White House. It opens the White House door. I'm like, okay. So I'm like, all right. So my partner keeps distracting her. So I kind of like turn away, and I get on the radio, and I'm like, I need an ambulance to my location. I am an emotionally disturbed person here. So EMS gets there, and I didn't, have any further coming. I told the other sectors, like, we're good here. I figured my partner and I can handle her if she does try and resist, but she was relatively calm. She's like trying to do a fashion show. She's putting on like a jacket, and she's walking back and forth and saying, look how, gorgeous I am. And I'm like, yeah, you look great, but those heels look like they hurt. Why don't you just sit down and, calm down a little bit and just take a rest off those 6-inch heels you have that are going to be thrown into my eyeball in about 2 seconds. But so EMS gets there, and she goes into full blown, I'm not going with them. They're not authorized. I don't know who they are. I have to go see the president, all this other stuff. So we tried to work with her. And as I'm sure you're aware, it's very hard sometimes to negotiate with emotionally disturbed people. It's you try and do your verbal judo. And I'm very big on, let's talk our way out of this instead of fighting our way out of this, because it just makes everything so much easier. So yeah. She just wasn't going. And I said, okay, now we have to handcuff her because she has to go to the hospital. She's crazy. She needs meds, to, not to put it very nicely, but that's just the fact of the matter. So we end up wrestling with her a little bit. We get her into the handcuffs. So we're in the ambulance, and the EMS guy is asking her information on the way to the hospital. And she's like, I'm not telling you anything. I'm not giving you any information. So the EMS guy looks at me, and he's like rolling his eyes. So I said, all right. I lean over to her, and I kind of like whisper, and I'm like, listen, I work for the Secret Service. We are going to the White House, but we have to verify your identification. You're being recorded right now. Give him your information. He is authorized to obtain it. She looks at me, and she like opens her eyes, and I'm like, yeah. So she turns to him and gives him the name, the address, the date of birth, social security number, all kinds of irrelevant information to validate that, she is the person who needs to go and speak to the president, who I think was Bush. I think President Bush was the president at the time. So I'm like, okay, at least she's compliant. So now I'm thinking ahead to like the psych ward in the hospital, right? So it's like the 2 double doors that are locked. You have to be buzzed in. Then you walk down like this long white hallway into like the little triage area where you sit with the nurse, and they go over, whatever the situation is, and log them into the procedure to the hospital. So I'm like, I don't want any problems there, because I'm thinking this chick needs help. And if they see that she is resisting in any form, they're going to strap her down to the gurney.
Yeah.
And I felt bad enough that she was in handcuffs. So I said, let me prep her for this. So I lean over, and I'm like, listen, this is where we're going to go. We're going to go into the hospital, but it's actually a front for an underground tunnel that leads to the White House. And you're going to go there, and you're going to be filmed. And if any of you, if you act out at all, it's going to be recorded, and you're going to be denied access to talk to the president. She's like, okay. And she's on board with this. So some people think about this, and they're like, yo, you are messed up for like going along with this chick's mental, disturbance, and you're just validating her mental instability. And for a point, yeah, okay, you have a point, but at the same time, if I don't play into this, she's going to get violent and it's not going to end well for her. And, and it makes everybody's lives easier. So we get to the hospital and I'm like, okay, here we go. These are the doors. Remember, you're being monitored. Behave yourself. Be quiet. Just walk calmly. So I had taken the handcuffs off of her before we got out of the ambulance. So I'm like, I think I have her now, right? Because we had been talking and explaining, and I was telling her about, my Secret Service experience and all this other stuff I was just making up. So we get into the nurse's office, and meanwhile, the EMS guy's looking at me like, these chicks are both crazy. Like, oh, I got 2 EDPs on this bus, not just one. Which is, like, whatever, man. It's the mean to the end. So we get to the nurse's station and we go in there and we sit down, and the nurse is like, okay, I leaned over and I said, listen, this nurse is an assistant to the Secret Service. She has to vet you, give her your information. She's authorized and whatever. So, she gives her the information. The nurse is looking at me, and that's all she deals with is EDPs. So she's like kind of keeping her mouth shut, and she gets it and she's going along with it. So they're like, okay, you got to take your jacket off and everything. And she's like, I don't want my jacket, because they give her the hospital gown. And I was like, no, you're not allowed to wear long sleeves, because we had an incident where somebody hid a knife up the sleeve and tried to stab the president. So we have to make sure that you don't have long sleeves on. And she's like, okay. So she takes the jacket off. And then they're like, we need your stockings, because stockings can be used to like hang yourself. So they had to have her take them off. So she's like, no, I'm not taking my stockings off. And so I lean over to her and I say, listen, as the Secret Service was doing multiple investigations, we found out that there was a way to put metal filament into stockings that would act as recording devices. And we don't want your conversation with the president to be recorded because it's highly confidential. So now I hear my partner and the 2 EMS guys who had decided to hang around for the show laughing hysterically in the hallway. And I'm like, shut up. Like, I got this chick. Like, let's just go. So, they're like, where is this chick? Where is she coming up with this stuff? But my EDP looked at me and she's like, oh, I didn't know that. I'm like, yeah, we just discovered that too. It's a pretty clever invention, but it's a problem. And this is, you're having a highly classified meeting with President Bush. Okay. Takes off the stockings, give them to the nurse. So I'm like sitting there and I'm like, the nurse is going to start admitting me, because how am I even, like, where is this coming up from in my head? I don't even know. But I'm like, they're going to admit me into the psych ward too, because they're like, you must be crazy for like getting along with this intense psychosis here. So in any case, she went voluntarily, and, I guess she got the meds that she needed. But I think it was a few months later, I think I get a phone call from on the desk. So the desk phone only rings if it's like a major person. So I answer the phone and it's like, Secret Service agent, whatever. So I'm thinking in my head, it's one of the guys pranking me, right? Like, this is just some BS nonsense and I'm getting my chops busted. But the job was so far away. It was like months prior. And I'm like, that's not really, like the ball busting usually happens like immediately. It's like the immediate gratification that you get from the chop busting. So I'm like, I don't know. I think this might be legit. And the guy's telling me he's Secret Service agent. He's got a girl there, and she was trying to get into the White House, and she's saying my name and that I authorized the trip to the White House. And I'm like, oh my goodness. I'm like, yeah. I said, does she have a key? And he's like, yeah, she has one key on her. And I'm like, yeah, that's my girl. That's yeah. She's just emotionally disturbed. She's not trying to kill the president or anything. She's not like a real threat. So I guess they psyched her down there. And then I think it was like a year later, when I got to work, I was told somebody's waiting for me. So I go over to where the civilians wait to talk to the cops, and there she is. And she thanked me. She's on meds, and she understood that, she was having visions or, whatever was going on in her life, and that she was on meds now, and she straightened herself out, and she like wanted to thank me. And I was like, you're welcome. No problem. I'm glad that you got yourself healed. But that was an interesting time. And I think it was, I think it kind of got out like, Mons, which was the name that the guys called me at work. It was my maiden name. Mons is a little nuts. She gets along with the EDPs. So if you have an EDP job, send her over, because the crazy recognizes the crazy, and they, they'll get along. And I'm like, yeah, man, whatever. Nobody got hurt. That's the name of the game. So
that's the name of the game, really. Speaking of crazy jobs, you talked about you were a street narcotics unit. I never really worked street narcotics. Man, that's a crazy deal there. Hit those streets and make those street buys and everything. But how was that?
I enjoyed it. We had a team. It was 5 guys and the sergeant. So it was, we were a very tight unit. We worked very close. And back then, marijuana was legal. That was illegal in New York City. It's legal now, but it was illegal. And I mean, for anybody who I get a lot of people who are like, why are you locking people up for weed? It's just a social thing, whatever. But from the experiences that I had, weed is always tied to some type of criminal act, whether it be gun possession, bigger, more powerful drugs that are, felony drugs like heroin and crack and coke. It's always tied to criminal activity. It's not the innocent, like hippie love and peace drug that people try and make it out to be. So the object of the game then was to get the drug dealers off of the streets, to clean up the streets. We don't want to see open deals, and we don't want to see open use. So I had a job one time, and we would drive around in like unmarked van and an unmarked car, and we would drive around and kind of just look and see what we found. And then sometimes we would target dealers and try and pick off the buyers and stuff. So one time it was like, I worked 6 at night to 2 in the morning then. And so we're driving around and we see this car. It was like a summer night. All the windows are down. And I mean, there was the cloud of smoke that was coming out of this car from the weed was like unbelievable. It was like, it looked like somebody was barbecuing there. There was so much smoke. So, and it's clearly weed. You could smell it as soon as you pull up. So we get there and it's like, okay, what do we got going on, guys? How's everything going? Just verbally talking them down. What's up? You guys are smoking weed? No big deal. Like we're just gonna, it's a desk appearance ticket. We're just gonna have to bring you in and, cut you loose. No big deal. Just we need you to step out of the car. So we always grab the driver first, tactically, because then at least the car can't move.
Right. Get the keys.
Unless there was like like you got to get the guy who can like run you over out of the car first. So,
Yeah.
so we always remove the driver first. So we go to open the car door for him and he just grabs onto the door frame and it's a tug of war for opening the door. So my partner's in front of me and he's trying to open the door and he's a pretty strong dude. And I'm trying to like squeeze my hand in there so that, I can just push the frame open, and my boss is reaching over us trying to fight. And we're in a tug of war for this stupid door because he doesn't want to open it. And I'm like, in my head, I'm thinking, it's weed. Like, it's not like a felony. You're not going to be going to jail. This is ridiculous. You're going to go to the precinct and be released in a couple of hours, and that's it. And he's fighting. And the 3 other girls in the car are just sitting there and they're just like, just smoking away as like, because it's like, and in my head, it's like, yeah, go ahead. I mean, we already got you for it. So whatever. So, so there's like razors in the door handle. So he starts reaching for the razor. So my partner's like, yo, he's got blades. So now it's like getting a little hairy because I'm like, he's going to start like slashing us. And that always gets messy with blood everywhere. So instead of doing that, when my partner yelled, he got blades, he starts yelling, Mama, Mama. And sure enough, from across the street, out comes Mama in, her pink fluffy slippers and her bathrobe and her hair curlers with the shower cap on. And she just runs across the street. Why are you beating up on my boy? Why are you beating on him? The police is violating, and going through the whole normal tirade of, how we're violating people's, civil rights and all sort of nonsense. And I'm like, Toots, he's smoking weed. Like, calm down, back off, whatever. So we end up, getting them out of the car and he was still wrestling around with us. So I sat there and I said, bro, if you had just gone along and just put your hands up and been handcuffed, you would have been released from the precinct and you would have had the girls with you and you would have continued on your night and, bought more weed and smoked some more. I'm like, but instead you decide to fight with us. You go grabbing blades, you fought with us after we were trying to cuff you. Now you're going to go for like resisting, which is like, now you got to go to the booking. So you like screwed yourself and you're calling for mommy. Big mistake, dude. Girls they're not coming back, and it's like, what are you doing? So it was fun, like the pickup collars were always interesting like that. And we set up a couple of times we had a spot where it was a very organized drug deal where they had like hats for the guys who were actually having the weed, and the steerer would take the money and he was a block away and he would text the seller so that if you went to go buy, you'd go and give your money to this guy. He would text the dealer, okay, he's good for a dime or he's good for, a half ounce or whatever. And then you would walk over to the dealer and he would just give you the weed. So, and, sometimes they kept the stash for themselves, or sometimes they kept it stashed, like, in a car on top of the tire, or, in the phone booth, because they used to have the payphone booths or whatever. So sometimes he had it near him, but it was smart because then, you're either going to lose the weed or the money, usually never both, in their minds. So we set up, and it was a summertime, and we needed somebody to go on the roof of the supermarket to kind of call out the shots and see what was going on. And I'm like, all right, I'll go up there. I'm going to get a nice tan. It's going to be, nice and peaceful up there, not realizing the roof was going to be 120 degrees in the sun, and I was going to be just baking up there. I kind of forgot about those details that are kind of important. But so, I'm up there and I'm calling out the shots, and you kind of like, okay, this guy's going to buy, this is what he's wearing, and you wait for him to kind of walk way off the set before my guys go and grab him, because you want to give the dealer a heads up. But in order to prove that he's dealing, we have to have the products that he sold to show that he's actually dealing weed and not like oregano or something.
Yeah.
So we did that a couple of times, and we had a couple of buyers, and so I'm like, okay, we're good to take down the dealer. So my boss gives the go ahead for the takedown, so I'm watching from the roof. And I see my guys pull up, and they go, up to the dealer, and the dealer sees them, and I'm like, oh, I saw the twitch. He's going to run. He's going. And sure enough, boom, he takes off, runs across the street, hops a fence, and I lose him because there's trees and stuff. So I'm calling out like he's in the yards, go a block over. He might be running through the yard. A little while later, my guys on my team come out with him, and he's limping a little bit or whatever, but nothing crazy. So I go back to the precinct, and my boss is like, yeah, your boy is, because it was my arrest. So he's like, he's refusing medical attention. And I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. I go into the cells, and it was a guy that I had known, he's a well-known drug dealer. I'm like, what's up, bro? And I see him standing there, and I see the bone pushing against the skin of his leg. And I'm like, yo, your leg is broken, dude. You got to go to the hospital. And he's like, no, miss, I'm okay. Just send me right through the bookings. And I was like, wow, this guy is like, he doesn't care. He's just going to deal with a broken leg. Like, how much pain this guy must have been in. I told him, dude, you're not going to make it through EMS and central booking, because once you bring the perps to central booking, which is where they hold them until they're arraigned, they have to see EMS. And if EMS says they're sick or if something's wrong with them, they go to the hospital. But they don't like doing that because they know it delays, it pushes them back in line. They don't get back into the line for arraignment until they get back from the hospital. So he didn't want to go to the hospital. I said, listen, bro, you got to go to the hospital. I'll bang out your paperwork. I'll get your fingerprinted or whatever, but you got to go. And I gave him a lot of credit for that. He didn't lie and say the cops beat him up. He hopped the fence and landed on a motorcycle and broke his own leg. So instead of being like, yo, cops beat me up, look, they broke my leg, I'm suing for $100 million. He was like, I hopped the fence. I landed on a motorcycle. It happens. And, he took it, and he was even taking the pain. So I saw him after that. He always walked with like a cane or a limp, but I appreciated and gave him respect, because at least he wasn't a total scumbag,
Really?
It is what it is. Yeah.
Working the streets like that, those street dealers and into that thing, man, I tell you what, there's action, constant, chasing people and trying to duke on them, trying to catch them dirty, and they're trying to keep you from catching them dirty. There's some wild ass stories. We were working crack dealers, and there's like one on every third corner. So my guys just got the van. You remind me, the guys got the van. And somebody'd sit back and watch, or somebody, actually one of the narcs would go by and make it buy of a rock, $25 rock. And then he'd radio, and then we'd radio the guys in the van. And in order to not alert everybody else, the van would start driving by kind of slowly. And there was two guys inside the sliding door, and they'd pull up next to this guy, and he's like, thinking he's going to make another sale. They'd open that door, reach out and snatch him, pull him in, slam the door, and take off again. So we kept that going for about 2 hours. Their dealers just kept disappearing.
That's almost like kidnapping right there. They don't know what's going on. It's like, hold on,
Really?
on a second. I am not dealing crack, man. Those dealers are going missing like crazy over there.
Really? So you talked about working intelligence at the street level. So I know that a lot of, when I was a young policeman, we had nothing like this at all. You were just each individual beat cop, if you will, I was responsible to find out who was who in my district. Some people did that and some people didn't. Because you had to get out of your car and go meet people and talk to people in order to find out, who was doing the crime and who was just, styling and profiling, hanging on the street corners. And so what was that like for New York? You had like an organized setup to do that.
Yeah, the program kind of grew on its own, and was really highly successful. So when I first went into the unit, it was me and my boss. It was just the two of us. So we were responsible for basically anytime a prisoner came into the precinct, we would debrief them. The detective squad would have their job of if they, confessions or if they knew anything about other stuff. But we were always interested in who's got guns, who's selling drugs, and, if they know anything about the shootings or homicides or anything like that. So we would work jointly with the squad a lot of the time. But it was mostly, the goal was to sign up informants. So if, they were willing to work, which a lot of people actually are, which was very helpful because sometimes the only way you're going to get into some of these groups is with an informant. And it's just the fact of the matter. And it's like, I would tell people, like, I don't live in your neighborhood, but I'm sitting here trying to make your neighborhood safer so that, your grandma can walk to the grocery store and not be robbed. And, I know you know stuff, information helps. You don't know what can help us, let us know. And, so I would sign these guys up and we would work with them and create cases and do, controlled buys of narcotics or gun sites and gun buys and stuff. And, end up with search warrants. That was the goal: get a search warrant and get the guns and get the drugs and lock up the guy and build a good enough case where they would, get jail time for their crimes. So it was a lot of fun because it was like you were kind of hiding in plain sight. We had like a rental car and we'd go out and like even sometimes the cops that I worked with wouldn't even see us set up on stuff. We'd be watching, or like our informant would be going somewhere to go do a buy, and like always happens, there's just like a 911 call at the same location for something totally different. And you're sitting here and like, not right now. And I'm like, oh gosh, this is going to, we got to like pull him. All right, pull the informant back. We got to wait for the cops to go because I don't want the cops to lock up my informant when they just did a drug buy or something, it's like, so those things always happen. But it was a lot of fun. It was just me and my boss. We would go out there, we would do what we had to do. And we got a lot of guns and a lot of drugs off the street. It was a really successful program. And we worked with other FIOs or field intelligence officers from surrounding precincts and throughout the entire city. So it was very successful.
Now, did you have a liaison with the narcotics people that, as you maybe develop somebody and then you could kind of work on up the chain? Did you get into that much, or ATF or whoever, you really had somebody who was dealing a lot of guns? Did you liaison with other units like that?
Yeah. I mean, working as a cop, which I'm sure you kind of, when you're on patrol, you work with these guys and everybody kind of graduates to other units eventually. Some people stay on patrol because, patrol's awesome. It's a lot of fun and it works for people with steady hours and stuff.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time these guys would go into other units. So I ended up working, and it's good because you have a rapport with these people already in these other units. So we worked with narcotics a lot with guys that I worked with on patrol. They went to narcotics. So we worked with them jointly on cases. We worked with the ATF and like the organized crime division of the NYPD on a bunch of cases on, people selling guns and stuff. It was good because it was, you collaborated with these other units and you learn new tricks of the trade. Sometimes you taught them new tricks of the trade. And I mean, even there was one time we had some information that there was like some methamphetamine coming in from overseas. So we contacted JFK and we're like, listen, we got a tip. This is what's up. So they're like, all right, come on down and, we'll set up on this guy and we'll grab him when he comes off the plane. So NYPD doesn't really have technical jurisdiction in that area. We kind of have to rely on the Port Authority police to go do their thing, and like Homeland Security guys. So we go down there and it's nice because you're kind of like, it's not you in charge, right? You're just sitting back. You gave them the information. You're doing surveillance is basically your only job. Keep an eye on this guy and make sure you don't lose them. And of course, our luck is National Geographic was doing some TV show, like, caught abroad or smuggling abroad or something like that. They were doing a TV show.
Yeah, I've seen.
So we get
Yeah.
there and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, I don't want this on TV, but I guess it had been a slow week for them. And like the National Geographic guys were like, this is great. We got to get this on film and put it on TV. And my boss and I are like, this is, we trying to avoid the TV cameras. Like, we don't want our guy to get killed here. So that threw a definite wrench in the operation, but it was going to be put on TV like so far down the road that it wouldn't have mattered or whatever. So we ended up, grabbing that guy, and he had like, I don't know, 4,500 pills on him or something. And, that was fun. So you do work with other units. And I guess because we all have, especially back then, we all had the same goal. So it wasn't like we were working to get the accolades. We weren't working to get the medals and the recognition and anything. If anything, we didn't want the recognition. I don't want my name on, the chief of department's desk for any reason, good or bad. I want to be unknown. But so you didn't work for things to get the awards and the medals and, the promotions or whatever. You kind of just did it because it was the right thing to do. And who knows how many lives this is going to save, and stopping people from ODing and stuff. Especially when fentanyl came out, it was like, we gotta really step this up and get this stuff off the streets because it's going to kill a lot of people. So it was a blast. I mean, even sometimes, not to, I'm like going on and on here, but it's just bringing up memories of like one time we were going to pick up an informant, my boss and I, to go do a buy. So I'm driving, and we have a rental car. We use like rental cars. So it has no light package. It's got no police, nothing. It just looks like a normal rental car. I'm in a fishbowl rental car.
Yeah, that's what we would call a slick car. That's what we always called a slick car. We'd buy for our unit and the other undercover units. They just buy used rental cars, and each two guys had a rental or had a car assigned to them. So yeah, maybe have a radio and a handy talkie. That was it.
Yeah, that's all you had was your radio that you brought with you. Like the car had no equipment, it wasn't but it worked because nobody saw you, even though the windows weren't even tinted. It looks like a regular car. So, I'm driving down the street and I come to like a 4-way stop, and I look to my left and I just see this car flying. And I'm like, he's not going to stop at that stop sign. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking at him, and the driver, most people driving are like this. This guy is like up looking around, like I almost see the whites of his eyes. His eyes are so big, and he's flying, and he blows right through the stop sign. And I said to my boss, I go, because, he was on the phone checking his emails and stuff. I said, yo, bro, something's up. He just did something. I don't know what it is, but he did something wrong. And as I'm saying that, my radio comes over, the sector comes over the radio, and they're like, yeah, we have a GLA, a stolen car. And he starts, going over with the information. So I come over and I'm like, FIO to the sector direct. I go, what, you got the plate on that car? And now I turn and I'm following him, right? And he gives the plate, and I'm right behind the car. I'm like, yep, that's him. So I put it over, then I'm following this car. That's now a fresh steal, right? They just stole the car. So this guy doesn't make me, but there weren't a lot of cars on the road. So I'm kind of trying to follow. He had slowed down now that he was like further away from the scene. So I'm trying to follow him at a half a block away, not letting him know that I'm following him. But I know eventually he's going to make me because there's no other cars on the road at this time. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So he makes a couple of turns, and then I'm like, all right, he's made me. I said to my boss, I go, he's going to bail. So I'm driving as I'm putting over, westbound on this, eastbound on this, northbound on this, waiting for like, where are my sectors so that they can pull this guy over? It's like they're trying to catch up to where I am. So he turns a corner, he guns it, turns another corner, and I see the cars stopped on the side of the road, driver door open, perps in the wind. I just see the tail of him go running through somebody's backyard. So I slam on the brakes. I leave my car like sort of in the middle of the street next to the perp's car. There's nobody else in the car. So my boss goes running into the backyard, but I'm like, I'm not hopping all those fences. And I can hear, because it was wintertime, I can hear him breaking branches as he's going through the yard. So I'm like, I'm going to just head him off. So I go running in front of the houses as I'm hearing him hopping fences and breaking the branches. and I'm putting over the addresses that the house that he's behind or whatever. And he keeps going. I mean, these guys, they're gazelles. When they're going,
Oh, I
they are
know.
gone. They have the
I
speed of
never caught
cheetahs.
anybody in my life. Never caught anybody in
Yeah.
my life.
Yeah.
Anyhow.
Unless they break a bone. Yeah. It's like, you're just not going to catch them, and of course I'm not prepared for like a foot pursuit. I was going out on a buy. I'm lucky I had a vest on, because usually I wouldn't even, I'd have it in the back of the car. But I just, for some reason, I think because it was cold, I just put an extra layer on. But so luckily I had that. But I was like, I'm in like boots. I'm not in like running sneakers. I'm like, I'm not set up for this. So I'm running down the block. I get to the end of the block and I hear him hop the last fence, and I don't hear anything now. But I hear the rest of the guys, the sirens and stuff, are going to where my car, I had left at a block previous. So I go over the radio. I set up a perimeter so that we have the whole block surrounded. And I kind of just turn the radio very low, and I like kind of crouch down because I'm like, I know he's in this yard, right? So he hops the fence, and I come out from the bushes and I just draw down on him. And I'm like, do not effing move. Stay right there. Get on the ground right now. And he just looks at me, and I'm looking at him, and I'm like, get on the ground. Get on the ground. And he's like, no. And he turns around and he hops the fence. And I'm like, son of a gun, man. You gotta be kidding me. I had him. I should have just tackled him. But I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
Whatever. Hindsight 2020. I'm thinking he might have a weapon. I'm by myself over here. Nobody knows where I'm at. And I'm a girl. I'm not as strong as he is. It's just not,
Yeah.
you can do whatever moves you want, but it's not hard to be overpowered. So I'm like, so he goes hopping back. So I put over the radio, like, he's coming back to you guys, because now I can hear, my guys coming this way from the branches breaking. And then my boss comes over and he's like, we got him. I got him in the backyard, whatever. And I'm like, no, man, I sent him back to you. I had him. Like, so I was all aggravated about that. But then I get back to my car, and my door that I had left open when I got into this foot pursuit was pushed the wrong way. So now it was like parallel to the front of the car, the motor, like it just totally got pushed. And I'm like, who hit my door? So one of the other cops comes over to me and he's like, yo, bro, I'm sorry. I hit your door. And I'm like, this road is literally 4 car lengths wide. You had like an entire lane to go around my car, but you had to hit my door. I'm like, this is a rental car. It's not like a PZ vehicle. Like, now we're going to have to pay to fix it. Now I have to go to accident retraining, which is 2 days off the street. I'm like, you got to be kidding me right now. So yeah, I go to accident retraining, and I'm like, yeah, I'm here because somebody else hit my car because I left my door open in hot pursuit. But this is my situation. No fun. And then I didn't even take the collar because one of the other guys was like, do you mind if I take this? And back then we weren't, I didn't need to make arrests then. And I had so many already. I'm like, yeah, dude, knock yourself out. You can have it. Yeah. So I didn't even get the collar. I said, which is an arrest.
Yeah.
It was like a lose all the way around. Yeah.
Well, one thing about working intelligence, like you said, you just want to stay in the background, pull some string, get some shit done, and move on to the next thing. It keeps the report writing down.
Yeah, I don't want to have to be well. I mean, not to. I feel like I'm rambling on with stories here, but every time you tell, it reminds me. Like we had a job because I did warrants, right? So I would do my own self-initiated search warrants, but then if patrol needed a search warrant for something, I would also assist them with it, especially because we had a lot of new guys, and I would like to help them out. Like when I was a rookie, all the old timers helped me out, so I felt it was my responsibility to do the same with the new guys. So my boss and I are driving around doing recon for a bunch of cases that we had. And we hear like, barricaded EDP with a gun in a house, right? Like hostage crisis, whatever. So I'm thinking to myself, well, they're going to get him out. If he's got a gun, they're going to need a warrant. So let's just go over there because they're going to need us anyway. So we take a ride over there. By the time we get there, the cops have the street totally taped off on both sides. There's crowds at either corner. The ESU tac truck, the big black one, like the heavy duty, like army tank one is in the middle of the street. I can see the guys tacking up and I'm like, this is great. I don't have to do a thing. I'm just going to hang back here behind the police lines and just kind of like watch because, my job was going to be after all of the excitement kind of ended. So I'm sitting over there. And my boss goes and sees a cop that he knows from another unit. So he goes over and talks to him. So I go over to like a bunch of civilians that are on the corner and I'm like, hey guys, what's going on? And, I'm in plain clothes. We worked in, jeans and a t-shirt was our uniform of the day. So They can see I'm a cop though, because I have my vest on and my shield is, on my belt and stuff. So I'm like, all right, what's going on? They're like, well, our dad is in the house and
Oh.
he's got a gun and all this other stuff. And I'm like, your dad? I'm like, all right. I'm like, is anybody on the phone with your dad right now? Like, is your dad talking to anybody? And they're like, no. And I'm like, oh, okay. Somebody missed a step here. I don't know what happened, but I got here late. But so I said, can you do me a favor and call up your old man and let's get him on the horn here? They call him up and he answers. And I'm like, hello, sir. This is Detective Baroldus from the NYPD. I hear you're having a bad day. What's going on in there? So now I'm like kind of involved, right? So as he's talking to me, I said to the family, where is his house? Where's your house? So they point. And I assume they point to this house across the street. So I said, okay. So I go underneath the police tape and I start walking. And my boss is like, Mons, where are you going? And I'm like, I got the guy on the phone. I'm going to go over there. And he just like rolls his eyes and starts laughing at me because he's like, you can't even, this is something you don't even need to get involved in. And you're still somehow involved. So I go walking down the block and, I'm talking to him or whatever. And I'm like, well, I hate talking to you on the phone. Like, I like to talk to people face to face. Do you want to like come out here and just come and talk to me and, whatever? Like, I want to try and help you out here. This seems like a problem we can solve together. And he's like, all right, I'll try and come out. So now I'm halfway down the block and I'm standing in front of where the ESU, Army tank truck is. And I'm facing what I think is his house. And I hear my boss yelling, Mons, Mons. And I look at my boss and I'm like, I got it. We're good. I'm giving a thumbs up. I got it. And then I hear my name being called at the other end of the block. And I see my anti-crime guys at the end of the block. They're like, Mons, Mons. And I'm like, yo, I'm good. I'm like, I got it. What's up? I'm like oblivious. I'm still talking to this guy on the phone. And then I hear somebody behind me yelling, Mons, Mons, look out. And I turn around and it's my buddy who was now in ESU at the door of the barricaded EDP with the gun, which I had my back to the entire time. So here I am walking into this really serious scene, talking to the guy, and I have my back to the target location where like I was a perfect target if this guy wanted to take a shot at me. And everybody's yelling at me to tell me like, take cover. And I'm just like, yo, I'm good. I got this. We're good. And they're like, are you nuts? And I'm like, yes, I am. You know this about me already, but it's okay. So, the ESU captain like pops his head up from behind the truck and he's like, detective, come over here. You're not safe where you're standing. And I'm like, yeah, I see that now. Sorry about that. So I ended up talking to the guy. I said, listen, come on out. Let's talk this out or whatever. So I got him to come out and, we got him in and he was just, he was an older gentleman and I guess him and his wife just didn't have a good day. And, he was at the end of his rope. So we were able to get out of that situation, without any problems. But boy, did I take some serious shot busting on that one.
Oh, I can't even imagine.
You're supposed to be the
like.
intel guy. Yeah.
Oh,
you're the intel guy. You don't know what house you're supposed to be watching.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know, man.
Oh, yeah. Well,
So,
as they
yeah.
say, all's well that ends well, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. But that's why being a cop is awesome. You never know what's going to happen.
Really.
You never know what the day is going to bring.
One last question. You mentioned anti-crime, and I've seen that term used in books and heard that term, but I never really knew exactly what that meant. What is an anti-crime squad at the NYPD?
It's the goal is to prevent crime before it happens. So you go out in unmarked cars and plain clothes, and you just kind of drive around and watch people and try and get the jump on people, grab the guns, stop the robberies from happening, or if it's already happened, go find the perp and grab them.
Okay. These are the guys that maybe go out and act as decoys, maybe act like you're drunk and falling down. You got a billfold there laying beside you, and then you got this little surveillance team watching for somebody to come up and try to take your money.
Yeah. I mean, you have to get special permission to do that. We did prostitution operations. So I would dress up as like a prostitute and do that kind of a thing. But in anti-crime, we didn't really have decoys set up. We didn't kind of like put the bait out there and wait for somebody to jump on the bait. We kind of just waited to see. I mean, we kind of knew, you have your gang members that and you have your, robbery recidivists and your burglar recidivists and stuff. And I worked nights almost my entire career. So you kind of knew the crews and who was out there and who was going to cause the trouble and stuff. And also you knew like, okay, these guys are always out there. So if something goes down, they're going to see it. So if something goes down in their area, it's like, listen, guys, we're going to, be out on your corner interrupting your social hour every day unless you help us out with who did this. So
Yeah.
it was a little bit of that stuff, but it was more like just trying to stop the crime before it happened.
Okay. I guess I had one other question. Now you stirred me with something, and all of a sudden I can't remember what it was. Oh, the reverse sting, what we called reverse sting for the street prostitution. We used to do a lot of those. Now I had a tax squad, and we would be periodically we would have to take our turn in the rotation. They'd get women from all over the police department to be the prostitutes on the street, and then we'd run the bus and make the arrest and have the chase car and all that kind of stuff. But those were some wild nights on that doing that. I don't know. Some gals liked doing it and some hated it. So which one were you? Did you like it or did you hate it?
Yeah, I think it went both ways for me. So it was fun. It was fun time because it's like just the craziness that happens. But part of me was like, this is like entrapment, man. You put a girl out there scantily clad. This isn't really fair. They're like, I don't know. I feel bad about doing this. Like it's a win-win for both people. The guy gets happy and the girl gets paid. Like I guess I didn't realize at the time, like the trafficking that occurs with it.
Yeah.
There's so many other ancillary violence that goes along with it. And in my small mind, it was like, you're just, I feel bad for these guys, but it was a lot of fun. I mean, there were a couple of hairy moments that we had,
Oh, yeah.
I wrote about in my book or whatever, where I'm like, oh, this is not going to end well for me yet again.
Yeah.
Here I find myself in this ridiculous scenario, but it was a lot of fun. You go out there for a few hours and, sometimes you prevent some crime, which is good.
Yeah. Then you all get together and have beers afterwards and go on home.
Oh yeah. Yeah. The beers were always afterwards, it was like, it was, they called it 4 to 12, but it was really a 4 to 4 because you went to work from 3 to 11:30, but you didn't get home until 4 in the morning because you went out drinking afterwards. So it was a 4 to 4. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Marique Baroldus, thanks a lot. This has been great. Those are great stories. And guys, there's a lot more great stories like this in this book. It's a page turner, I'm told. So really, thank you for coming on the show, Marique.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a great time.
All right, guys, I like to ride motorcycles, so watch out for motorcycles when you're out there on the streets. And if you have a problem with PTSD, if you've ever been in the service, be sure and go to the VA website and get that hotline number. And hand in hand with PTSD goes drug and alcohol addiction. And our friend Anthony Ruggiano, former Gambino soldier, is now a drug and alcohol counselor down in Florida. And he has a hotline on his website. So, hey, if you got a problem, go get hold of Anthony Ruggiano and then tell me about it, what that was like. That would be interesting. And other than that, like and subscribe. And I've got a couple of movies out there on Amazon you can rent for $1.99. I've got a book out there, and Marique's got a book out there. There will be links in the show notes down below. And like and subscribe. Give me a review if you think about it. So thanks a lot, guys. And one last time, thank you so much, Marique, for coming on the show.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. 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 Much.